Hello, guys. Sorry about the delay. I was trying to set these slides up, and I go through and I do the highlighting in PowerPoint, and then somehow when I save them, it, I don't know, just disappears. Okay, good. All right. It's always scary at first, if I don't see a response right away, I'm like, is anybody hearing me or am I just talking to myself again? Okay, good. So sorry about the delay. I was working on these slides, and when I make them in PowerPoint, I do all this highlighting, and then when I save it, it disappears. And I don't know why that happens. So I have to come back and screenshot them all again like pictures and then put it all back in there again. So that's what happened. I forgot that that happens and just tried to save it like that, put it up, and then realized there was no highlighting. So I like to have it highlighted both for myself and to make it easy for you guys. So, I just wanted to check in and see how you're all doing in this mad, crazy world we're living in. And sorry I wasn't around for a few days. I'm still not feeling great. And today I just got back from physical therapy again. It's been a little rough. I've been discouraged how long this recovery has been. And, the loop is just making it complicated and longer than it should be. But also, I felt heartsick. Yeah, just heartsick about the things in the world. What I was saying is I have this thing about injustice. It's always been there, like, since I was a kid. If I saw someone being mean, I had to say something. And sometimes there's just nothing you can do. And it's so frustrating, and it, like, eats at me, like, I feel it in my bones. And I just sometimes I just have to just back away for a minute, as really upset about this whole judge thing. I don't know if you've all seen, the what is it called? Was it a motion for recusal that Brett filed? Did you guys see that? I'm gonna be going through that too, and I recorded an interview that I had with, with Brett and Aiko, and we're still working on it. There's some important things, there's important people, and I tried it once before in a live with Leanne, but I don't think we got the whole story across very well. We were both nervous, and I was new at doing lives. She was new at doing lives. It ended up pretty messy. So at the end, a lot of people were asking, I still don't understand the story. What really happened? And I still didn't understand the story or what really happened. So I've been looking into that, and a couple of other people have done lives about it as well. But I also recorded an interview with them. So we're trying to get that just right. But in the meantime, I was reading over his document, and it is extremely well written. Really, really well. And it covers a lot of the aspects of this conflict of interest. There was some discussion, and a lot of people came at me too, like, why are you working these people up? And you don't know what you're talking about. And this is pathetic. And, all the nice things people like to say on social media. I still stand by what I said. And that's what we're going to go through that today. But a lot of the things in Brett's document covered it. And it may have been a little bit hard to follow because there's a couple of different issues with Brett. But there are two aspects to Brett's his filings. One of them stems back a couple of years. They've actually been trying to pursue this legally since 2021. And there are a couple of different issues. There are issues with Free Guy, there are issues with Deadpool and Wolverine, and there are it's Shapiro messing with my mic. I believe it. So there are issues with what was the third one? Mythic Quest. And there's even a bit with Another Simple Favor. But these are issues that that they've been trying to pursue since 2021, long before this lawsuit. So there might be things that you come across in his documents that you don't understand, that you will understand after I air our interview. The other issue is that Brett is of the Métis people. It's an indigenous people in Canada. And he campaigns really hard for his people. He goes against things like erasure of them. So, for example, what that means is in Hollywood, when there is a certain ethnic group or any kind of protected group that's supposed to be being portrayed, if you're going to be true, you should have actors that are of that group, whatever that group may be. When you don't, it's considered erasure of these people. So he's been trying to fight against that for years now. And there are issues that he has contacted, for example, Disney, Marvel, I believe, Hugh Jackman even. So these people are aware of who Brett is. Ryan knows who Brett is. Rob knows who Brett is. Hugh Jackman knows who they are. They know these accusations that have been brought against them since 2021. So when Marvel got brought to this case because of the Nice Pool character, that's why Brett joined as a third party. He wasn't asking to become part of the entire lawsuit. He was asking, please, because part of what Justin had asked for is all of the information around the character of Nice Pool, because they believe that it was formed about Justin. Well, Brett had already made the accusation that part of it might have been about him as well. Well, before Justin made the claim about him. It could be one of those two birds with one stone situations. We know that Taylor Swift likes to put what she calls Easter eggs, hidden little things, and the Swifties like to dissect and try to figure out what they are and what they mean. And Blake and Ryan have started kind of copying that. So that's it. It very well could be that Nice Pool could have more than one meaning. And there's reasons that Brett feels like it has to do with him. And there's reasons that Justin feels like it has to do with him. Very well could be both. So that's what it's about. But he really did a good job in his documents. He filed the motion for recusal. I believe there were 2 exhibits. And then he added an addendum when he found even more information. So if you go through and read those, and he's got them posted on his X, I'm not sure if they've been officially added to the docket at this point. But when you read them, they're extremely well written, and they really do an excellent job at bringing this conflict of interest to the front. And like I said, I still stand by what I said. Not everybody will agree with me, and that's okay. I don't expect to try to convince you of something you don't believe in. I just want to show you why I think that it's a problem. So, let me check my notes. Before I get into that, though, I wanted to say something about Blake. Before I go to sleep at night, I usually kind of just scroll through social media. Mostly Instagram is the main one that I use. And I saw a post from Salma Hayek, and it was so good, and it was so informative. You know, I've clicked on some of the, you know how Instagram is when you watch one video, then they start feeding you lots of videos that are about that same topic. So I had watched some about what's happening to the Hispanic people living in our country, especially children. Children are going to school, and I saw principals and teachers talking about them having to be like a barrier to not let ICE enter these elementary schools looking for these students. Or we've seen parents being taken and they're screaming and crying, my kids are in school, my kids are in school, because their thought is their kids are going to come home from school or be waiting to be picked up from school, and there's no parents. So it's a really horrifying situation. One of the reasons I was saying that I feel heartsick, because I feel like humanity has learned no lessons from history, and it's just crazy. But so in this feed, I don't follow her, but Salma Hayek came up and she has this video, so I'm going to play that for you real quick.
I feel that all this information, sometimes instead of clarifying things.
Do you think that immigrants are stealing American jobs?
Yes.
No, I don't. We need their help here.
Sometimes it creates just more confusion. So I'm going to share with you some data that I think is going to blow your mind.
How much do you think undocumented immigrants pay into the tax system?
My guess is nothing.
In 1996, the IRS created the ITIN, the Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. This was created for undocumented immigrants as an invitation to pay taxes just so that they could show good moral character.
Undocumented paid into Social Security, Medicare, $96 billion.
How is that possible?
ITN.
This doesn't qualify them for Social Security or immigration status.
And you're kidding me about the amount that they're paying in.
I'm not kidding.
Undocumented immigrants paying taxes.
Do you think we are portrayed as takers or makers?
They're more portrayed as takers.
They're portrayed more as takers.
Latino entrepreneurs are starting businesses at a faster rate than any other demographic, accounting for 36% of all new businesses in the United States in 2023.
48% of our agricultural workforce is immigrants.
If U.S. Latinos were a country, we would rank as the 5th largest economy in the world.
You can't just say, hey, I'm going to get rid of these people, and then look at the farmers that are left without workers.
They didn't have anybody to pick them, so a lot of farms went out of business.
By 2027, we are projected to surpass Germany and Japan if we were a country.
The Latino GDP had the fastest growth rate, faster even than China.
We have doctors, engineers. We have a beautiful community.
Latinos are the best hope of the U.S. economy.
I hope that you found all these studies and data interesting, or at least thought-provoking. I feel that...
So my point with this is that I found it so beautiful and so informative, and I thought she's so brave and good to speak out. And then I was thinking about Blake, because what was it, like 2 weeks ago, we see these pictures. Blake's lost all of her old friends. And then we saw these pictures all of a sudden. She's out with her sister and Selma. She's grabbing all over Selma. Selma looked a little uncomfortable, leaning a little more towards Robin. Then we're being told, oh, they've been friends all these years. They're so close that Blake's kids call Selma Auntie. And we're supposed to just buy all this up. Then I was thinking, do you remember Blake when she was talking about when Justin and all of them, when the motions to dismiss were granted, and she had her little victory tour, and she made this little speech about how she was the voice of women, and that her times 100 speech, she kind of said something like that too. She made a big deal about how girls aren't safe at school or at home, and all of these things. And she's made it out to be, she said that she's going to speak for women and be the voice of women who are unsafe. And I thought, This is supposedly her friend. This is out there. It's so easy to click a little arrow on your Instagram and share someone's story to your story. And Blake hasn't done this. She's the voice of women. This is her friend. But she can't be bothered to not only not make anything of her own, but she can't take the 3 seconds it would take to share, her sister, apparently her sister, because she says it's my kid's aunt. She can't take any time to do that, but she's the voice of women. And what has she been doing? What's she been using her voice for? What have we seen? We've seen her hawking her hair products. We've seen her standing in this glass box. Why'd they let her out of that? We've seen her promoting this author with that silly little bag she's been making. We saw her promoting her booze. At one point, telling some guy he wasn't doing something right. It was going to be carbonated. He starts pouring. It wasn't even carbonated. The woman doesn't even know her own products. There was a picture of Scarlett Johansson that showed all of these piercings up her ear. Now all of a sudden, Blake's addicted to piercing and going and getting her ears pierced. This is what she's been doing as the self-proclaimed voice of women. And it just made me sick. Like I said, she couldn't make her own stuff, but she couldn't even bother to repost her supposed good friend. Yeah, I don't know anything about Selma. Like I said, I don't follow her. It just came up because I've been watching certain, Instagram reels and stuff, and that came up. And I just thought it was interesting, but it made me think about her saying how close they are and that she's the voice of women and that girls aren't safe. And now when there's really a situation of women and girls not being safe, she has nothing to say except buy my booze, buy my hair stuff, and look at me. So, where am I going from here? But the case has been very discouraging, as well as what's been going on. I said something, I don't know, a month or two ago, maybe more like 2 months ago, when I was talking about the case. We had just gone into discovery, and we kind of thought things were gonna wind down at this point. We weren't gonna hear too much until we got a little closer to the actual trial. Little did we know all of this other stuff was gonna happen. But I said at that point that at this part of the case, there's no humanity. That everything is about deadlines and page limits and the judge saying you didn't file this right, file it better. I'm dismissing this because it wasn't filed right. It's all this administrative stuff. And in all of that, there's no humanity. And I'd said at the time, we don't really see the humanity until there's a jury. Then it's put in human hands to look at it and decide what's morally right or wrong. Where the decisions that the judge is making right now aren't really about what's right or wrong from a moral standpoint. They're more administrative. But at the same time, when he's making rulings about things like motions to dismiss, there still should be some humanity in his decisions. Something more than just black and white. And I feel like, and a lot of people, myself included, even though we had feelings about him and his decisions for some time now, we were kind of careful about what we said. Especially attorneys who've made their face known, their names known, maybe even their law firms known. I understand those people have to be careful about what they voice. I love being completely anonymous. I can say what I want. Something makes me mad, I can say it. If I think someone's being a dirty, low down character, I can say it. And I love that. But at the same time, I understand why others can't do that. I don't understand who made the rule that on YouTube, attorneys have to be neutral. Like I mentioned this in my last video. As long as they're not on the actual legal team, I don't see that that's a problem. Attorneys are in their jobs, they're the least neutral people. They are going full steam for their client, and everything they say has to say the other side's wrong. They don't give them any grace, any leeway. They can't. They have to fight to the end for their client. So I don't know where this rule came from that people have to be neutral on YouTube. It's YouTube. You know, you can't come here for legal advice. You come here to hear people talk about the situation. Sometimes we just want to just get it off our chest. Sometimes we just enjoy the conversation of it. But I don't see why people have to be neutral on YouTube. I don't understand that. But anyway, after several days passed, I could see, like, even in the faces of several people who talk about this case, attorneys, non-attorneys, after it sunk in, after the initial shock of everything, and even the people who put on a brave face when it first came through and said, okay, well, legally this may be sound. After it processed for a couple of days, you could kind of see that disappear off of quite a few people, that they no longer feel okay with some of it after they read it again or after they thought about it for a while. They started to see some more problems. Part of it was that, oh wait, unsubscribe. That's been happening. That's been happening too. Who did it happen? Daily Dose of Donna, I think. I went to watch and I wasn't subscribed, and I'm like, what in the world? I've been subscribed to her for a long time. But, and I've heard other people say that that's been happening, that they get unsubscribed. It's very strange. So, but anyway, I've seen some attorneys come back and say, you know, after thinking about this for a while, I noticed this. We also saw Omar, and then he was joined by another attorney, Rachel. And I don't know if you guys watched that, but it's The Tilted Lawyer. And they went through some really interesting points. And it was about published and unpublished cases. So a lot of times when judges are making decisions, if there is a very standard, like from the US Supreme Court decision, they have to follow that. They have no choice. If it's not a situation like that, they rely on cases that have been won in their level of court, and they use those to make their decision. So when they put out things like an order, they will post those as their reasoning behind why they made the decision that they made. Normally, after researching cases, they take those cases and say, based on these cases, this is where my decision came from. But watching that, it almost felt like he made his decision and then he looked for cases to support his decision. But that's backwards. So instead of using standard published cases, it's like he had to look for these non-standard, non-published cases. Do you know what I'm saying? That bothered me a lot, among other things. A lot of it bothered me from the get-go. But I've heard more and more people, and in fact, I got the video, but it's long, and I meant to edit it, and I forgot to. And then I started the live, and I was like, oh no, that's not edited, but it's too long to play. But But I've mentioned her before. There's a TikToker called Lil Girl Attorney. It's Lil, not little. But she talked about how she kind of said the same thing about sometimes even her own cases, a judge will make a decision and she feels like the judge was wrong or that it wasn't fair. And I could just like looking at her, I just felt her feelings like from her face and from her tone of voice. And she was kind of without like directly saying, oh, the judge, was so wrong, was so biased, was so this. She doesn't really say, she doesn't overstep or go as far as I did, for example. But there's just a feeling going on of people who originally said, yeah, this is right, to like, no, it's not so right. Judge Liz, yeah, I saw that she said that too. A lot of people are starting to feel that way. And let me see, back to my notes because I wandered away. I've also been sent some messages from you guys, some screenshots from you guys. And a lot of points that people have talked about. Yes, she did make the mistake of applying 47.1 when the judge clearly said he did not. But the rest of the stuff was pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, I think it took a while. For one, it was so long. It was 132 pages. It took a long time to read the whole thing. I think people like skimmed it and made a really quick reaction right off the bat. But something like that, hey, Leanne, yeah, there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot. I've tried so hard to be good and say he was legally sound when he said this. I can find law to support this. But this time I just got mad. Well, you heard me. I was mad. I rarely get that mad, but boy, was I mad. So, but as I was saying, some of you guys have sent me some stuff. Chocolate Traveler sent me this. Let me see. I think it should be my next slide from Reddit. The place that I'm like, I never go there. Yes, Rose is Wild. Absolute fact. He's been working on this for months. There's no way that was written in a short amount of time. That's huge. This man has an outrageous caseload. He had a million things to work on. The attorneys in this case kept coming to him, fighting with each other. And he's got so many things to do. For a judge to sit down and write something this long, he's been working on this for a very long time. And that's one of the things that really bothered me. Because so many new things have come out that should have been taken into consideration that were not taken into consideration in this time that he was writing it. And it didn't seem, I don't know, trying to be a little bit more careful and not get myself heated up this time. But this, let me put, oops, sorry. Like this. So she sent me this, and I don't know if this is no, not an attorney. I thought it was an attorney, but NAL, not a lawyer. Made this breakdown, and I don't know who this person is, if it's a man or a woman. So I'm just going to say they. But it's a really good point. It says that the New York Times read a number of other documents provided by Lively or her representatives, which the New York Times said amounted to thousands of pages. Now, if you followed me for a while, you know that way back in the very beginning, I made 3 or 4 different episodes specifically about the New York Times because they're under so much protection in New York. New York has extra laws on top of the protection that's already available in this country. And I think it's because of the New York Times. They've been around so long and they've won so many cases. They've set so much legal precedent. In fact, the US Supreme Court decision that's used for malice was a New York Times case from 1964, and that's New York Times versus Sullivan. So I knew this was going to be an issue. I knew it was next to impossible to go after them. But I really felt like they were so negligible and so reckless in this story. And that's the first thing I said in all of my episodes. Yes, they're protected for judicial proceedings, but these thousands of pages of emails and texts that they mentioned in their article, that they mentioned in their video, were in fact not a part of any judicial proceeding. As far as we know at this very moment, they are still not a part of these judicial proceedings. And way back when they had a hearing early on, the judge had said that he granted their motion to stay discovery because he was leaning towards granting their motion to dismiss. I thought it would come right away, but it didn't. He held it back till he did all of them. But in this time, I started to get hopeful, thinking it's been so long since he said that. Maybe with all this that's come out, he's reconsidered or is reconsidering. Oh, now we know he wasn't. But as more came out, like about the sham lawsuit and the sham subpoena, I feel like the New York Times started to look more and more like they could be involved, like they might need their discovery unstayed, brought back into the lawsuit, to find out, did they have anything to do with the sham lawsuit, for example? Had Blake already reached out to them and they said, oh, you need a subpoena, and that's why the sham lawsuit took place? Could it be that... Another thing I thought, well, when they saw this subpoena, did they not think this was weird? If I saw a subpoena with no court stamp, if I was going to report on a story that wasn't well known, and someone said, I got this information through a subpoena from this lawsuit, the first thing that I would do on my little YouTube channel, and I've said this before, I would go to the website of whatever courthouse this came from, and I would look the case up myself to make sure it existed. Now, if I have that thought in my head, why wouldn't the New York Times? Especially when this subpoena comes up from a lawsuit from Van Zandt to 10 Does. And the other thing is they have a huge legal team. Why didn't they look at this stuff and say, this is weird, something's off about this? So I thought all this time that as this stuff was coming to light, the judge was reconsidering granting their motion to dismiss even. Never dreamt that he was going to go ahead and grant it and grant everybody else's too, most of them with prejudice. So, but what's weird about this part is that the origin of these thousands of pages of texts and emails is very sketchy. We can't say that they're privileged because they've not been authenticated. We don't know their origin. So how can you say they're privileged? When they come from... I'm going to go turn... My AC just kicked on and that's going to be kind of loud. I'm going to go turn that off real quick. Hold on. Sorry, guys. So privilege happens to very specific things. So if you're just talking about something that Blake got from a sham lawsuit from Stephanie Jones, now we're getting really, really sketchy about what we're calling privileged. Not only did the judge accept these, but he goes on to say in his ruling on page 28, he says, let me see, is it on here or do I just, yeah. The article itself states that the allegations were detailed in a complaint and the other statements were not included. The court assumes that those statements are consistent with the other statements from the complaint reported in the article. Now we have the word assume. Do we find the word assume as a legal basis for anything? When have we ever in a code of law read that it says it's okay to assume something? Never. That's when. Never. But here it is in his decision. So not only is the use of that word shocking, but it's a stretch because he's admitting that he has not laid eyes on these thousands of pages that he's allowing as privileged. He has absolutely nothing to base this ruling on, yet he makes it with prejudice, no less. So, how does anyone make an irrevocable ruling on something that they've not seen? Can you explain this to me? Blake could have given the New York Times anything. Absolutely anything. We know she likes to take authorship. We know Ryan likes to write things he's not supposed to write. They could have sat down and typed that stuff up themselves. Who's to say they didn't? As I said, the judge has not laid eyes on this stuff. Prior to that, she got it from Stephanie Jones. We don't have Stephanie Jones's stuff authenticated. Stephanie Jones might have selected whatever she wanted off of that phone. We already know a lot of it was taken out of context. We know some of it's been accused of being edited. We know that Stephanie was still working for Justin when this all began, and that she was fighting Blake to the point that Jamie and Justin told her to stop because she was making things worse. So we know that she was involved in this communication. I'm assuming someone sneaky like her is alleged to be, would go through and want to take out anything that implicated herself before she handed it over to Blake. That's entirely possible. Why? Because it's not been authenticated. It wasn't properly retrieved by a proper subpoena, properly overseen by a court. So it's sketchy how Stephanie got it, perhaps even criminal. It's sketchy how it was handed over to Blake, and it's sketchy how it was handed over to the New York Times. But this judge saw fit to assume that it was just fine. And he assumed it so far as to dismiss with prejudice. Their only recourse at this point is to appeal, which is going to be difficult, and he knows it, especially when you see that he covered his butt as much as he could by this ridiculous novel size order. He wants it to look like he had everything covered so that nobody can come along and undo his ruling in an appeal. I'm sorry, this is not okay. You do not assume that something you've never laid eyes on is just peachy, especially when it has such a sketchy origin. This is just one of the reasons I say something is off about this man. Okay, where am I now? The other part is that Justin is a public figure. He's an actor. But everybody forgets, and I'm guilty of it too. We're always saying Justin and Blake, Justin and Blake. I've been trying to condition myself to start saying Wayfarer, the Wayfarer parties, because this isn't just Justin. There are a slew of people that had real harm because of Blake's accusations. It's Jamie Heath. Jamie Heath is a producer. He is not a public figure. He is not an actor. He's a behind-the-scenes producer. Jennifer Abel is not a public figure. She's a behind-the-scenes PR person. Melissa Nathan is not a public figure. She's a behind-the-scenes crisis management person. Jed Wallace is not a public figure. He's a behind-the-scenes, another type of crisis management person. These people are not all public figures. And this is another thing the judge did. With prejudice, dismissed it all according to the actual malice standard. They're not under the actual malice standard. They're just people. Yes, the entire content. People have unalived themselves for things like this. Just the violation, the invasion of privacy, the humiliation of things like this. This is a huge deal. And you know what I hope? I hope she goes out and files actual criminal charges. Because once she has those, she can re-enter this into the lawsuit. I wish she had already done it. As soon as they realized what happened to her phone and added her as a third party, they showed this is like 3 federal crimes and 1 state crime. File the charges. And then the judge can't deny it. He can't say there's not enough evidence. But it's bad what was done to these people. And they are private citizens. Yeah, they need the subpoena. People keep saying, why hasn't he done anything about it? He has. He's asked for it. But he can't move on it till he actually has it. And Blake, last we've heard, hasn't given it to him. So I really hope that they pursue all of that criminally. And then it gives them more weight to their fight. But that's the second mistake. The first mistake is assuming, and the second mistake is ruling based on actual malice, which I feel like could be proven once all this comes in. I think the thousands of pages is already a really big step in that direction. I've always said that. I don't know. I don't understand. I do not understand this man's way of thinking. After reading 132 pages, I still don't understand. Okay, let me, get back to my notes. But yeah, this is done and over, not just for Justin, but for all of them on a very unfair ruling because they don't have to meet malice. Again, what I said, none of us know what Stephanie gave to Blake. Things could be edited, things could be taken out of context. Stephanie Jones and Blake have both taken the same text message and said, oh, this applies to me. This is what she said about me. But they both claimed it. So which person is it about? even between the two of them, they can't sort it out. We know Stephanie Jones' history, as it was described, of losing it, of stalking people who left her company. But this judge was happy to sit there and take her word that these messages were legit and to assume. And I just have so many problems with this. All right. The next thing I want to say, I got so many messages from everybody about removing the judge. As nice as that would be, it's not as easy as it sounds. And I know my Murdoch crew, we saw just in the course of the one conspiracy case, we saw 2 judges removed. One was removed because it seemed that he was favoring certain attorneys that he was friends with in real life. So he was removed completely from being a judge. Another judge was had to recuse himself from the case because he hired a clerk that used to be an intern in one of the sides of counsel. So he had to recuse. So if you follow me from that, it kind of looks like, judges can come and go real easily. I don't know if this part came through. Yeah, it's not easy to remove judges. They're nominated by the president and then put in place by the Senate. So it's not easy for them to be removed. In fact, it's a process. If they're going to be removed, they're removed by the House of Representatives. So he's not going to be removed. That's not going to happen. Recusal, he can choose to recuse himself. They can attempt to recuse him. He can fight it. A lot of things can happen. It's not so easy unless he says, hey, you're right, I don't belong in this case, and steps aside nicely. It's not an easy thing to get him off this case. I personally feel he should have never accepted this case. I know people are saying that wasn't he refused before? 13 times. 13 times he's not declared conflict of interest and overseen a case that he shouldn't oversee. As of 2022, so there's probably been more since then. Not 22 times, 13 times. 13 times as of 2022. So it could be more since then. But let's see, where was I? About the judges. Yeah, they're probably all going to have investments, but when you're sitting there with a mountain of investments in Hollywood, why would you take on a case that took place in Hollywood? That's a terrible idea. And we're going to go through the rules of why he should have known that it was a terrible idea and why he should have never accepted the case in the first place. Brett did an excellent job mentioning all the reasons that people might look at the situation and reasonably question him, question why he's a judge on this case. So if you haven't read that document, I would highly recommend that you recommend it. It mentions, now he quoted in his documents this code, U.S. Code Section 455, disqualification of justice, judge, or magistrate judge. And it does talk about bias. What this code says is that a judge shall disqualify himself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. Now, I had so many people say, oh, it's just a little stock, and they come with their laughy faces, laughy face emojis and sarcastic remarks. Oh, it's $15,000. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. But let's look at what the law actually says. In which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. This doesn't say he has to be doing something wrong. It just has to be questioned. We're questioning it. When you own this much stock in all of these companies, when your brother has worked with these people and these companies, is it realistic to think that some people might have questions? It is. It also mentions bias, where he has a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party. We might come to the conclusion that he just might have bias towards where he makes a lot of money or where his brother might be involved. Where number 2 under B, where in private practice he served as lawyer in the matter in controversy. And look how distant it gets. Or a lawyer with whom he previously practiced law served during such association. Look how far removed it can be to give the appearance of personal bias. Now, one of the things I had discovered is that just before he became a judge, one of his last jobs was working on this huge antitrust where Disney was coming together with 20th Century Fox. He was one of the attorneys. His law firm worked on this huge deal. It would have been an outrageous amount of money. And he was working on it. And what was happening during that time? Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 being made by 20th Century Fox. Or I can't remember. Now I'm not looking at the chart. I don't want to say it wrong. But it was affiliated with that while he was working on this case. So this is another issue. Number 4, he knows that he individually or as a fiduciary or his spouse or minor child residing in his household has a financial interest in the subject matter in controversy or in a party to the proceeding or any other interest that could be substantially affected by the outcome of this proceeding. Then it mentions a person within the 3rd degree. And we're going to see a little bit later how the 3rd degree does include brother. The next part is known by the judge to have an interest that could be substantially affected by the outcome of the proceeding. Now, this was a really big issue because he owned stock in ABC, which Paramount Global falls under. Paramount has a contract with Ryan's company, Maximum Effort. It's called First Look Rights. That means that whatever Ryan makes from his company, they get first dibs on it. So if he's producing something and they think that looks good, before anybody else can touch it, they get to say, we want this. Just imagine how much money they would have had to pay for those rights. One of Ryan's projects has already been delayed. Is he holding it back because of how badly Another Simple Favor was looked at on its release because of this lawsuit? We don't know. We don't know what the reasons are that it's holding back. But we do know the effect that this lawsuit and these accusations had on the release of Another Simple Favor and could continue to have on anything that's released that's associated with Ryan or Blake. So this company has paid probably millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to get this first look privilege. If Ryan can't put stuff out, or if Ryan puts stuff out that isn't received well, that's a huge loss for them because they pay for that kind of stuff with the thought that when these things are released and do come out, they're going to make a killing off of it. So if they pay all that money and they get nothing for it, or they get stinkers of movies for it, that affects their net worth. Their net worth affects Judge Lyman's portfolio, and that is a fact, an inescapable fact. So there is a financial outcome to this. I also went to the Code of Conduct for United States judges in addition to that law code. Canon 2, a judge should avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all activities. Again, this doesn't mean that the judge has to actually do something wrong to be recused, or to recuse himself, or for people to demand he be recused. The very appearance of impropriety is to be avoided. Does he have an appearance of impropriety right now? I say yes. You can all have your own opinions on that. But when I saw the list of all of the affiliations, I was gobsmacked. And here's the thing, it's easy to say when you're talking about somebody else, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But you've got to put yourself in Wayfarer's shoes. Would you want to sit at that table, and at the other table is Blake and Ryan, and know that your judge has a financial interest in things that are affected by the people at the opposing table? I dare say all the people who came at me about it would not. None of us would feel okay sitting there knowing that the judge has a financial interest in the people that they're on the other side of the table of. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much. Does it give the appearance of impropriety? I say it does. You can decide for yourself. Hey, Aunt Lala. Respect for the law. A judge should respect and comply with the law and should act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. Is he promoting public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary? I say no. You all have a right to feel how you feel about it. But I think a good amount of us do not feel confidence in the integrity or impartiality that this was allowed to take place. B, outside influence. A judge should not allow family, social, political, financial, or other relationships to influence judicial conduct or judgment. I don't know that we can feel completely comfortable that this is not happening. At least that's how I feel. You guys are all welcome to feel however you want to feel about it. Canon 2A, it expands on this a little bit more. An appearance of impropriety occurs when reasonable minds, with knowledge of all the relevant circumstances disclosed by a reasonable inquiry, would conclude that the judge's honesty, integrity, impartiality, temperament, or fitness to serve as a judge is impaired. A judge must avoid, it says it again, all impropriety and appearance of impropriety. So I've done a little inquiry. I looked up his financials. I concluded that his honesty, integrity, and impartiality is impaired. I concluded that there's an appearance of impropriety. It's up to all of you to conclude what you want to conclude, but I think a lot of us have come to that conclusion. And here's the important part. A judge must expect to be the subject of constant public scrutiny and accept freely and willingly restrictions that might be viewed as burdensome by the ordinary citizen. because it is not practical to list all prohibited acts. The prohibition is necessarily cast in general terms that extend to conduct by judges that is harmful, although not specifically mentioned in the code. So, what does this mean? Maybe these are things that we wouldn't expect to be on us as ordinary citizens, but as a determiner of right and wrong in lawsuits, a judge should expect to be under this type of scrutiny, which is why when they know there's some sort of conflict of interest that can be seen even as the appearance of impropriety, they should decide to recuse themselves because they know they are kept to a higher standard than we are. And like it says, not everything could be mentioned in the code. There's always something new that's going to come up. And so it doesn't cover everything, but you can take this principle that it shouldn't have the appearance of impropriety and apply it to things that would make you lose that appearance of doing things properly. Tammy, thanks for the word assume in Lehman's order to dismiss. That's certainly going to be in my complaint. Oh yeah, Tammy's writing a complaint. It's not a legal term. You're never going to find that in a legal decision. Assume. Something you should not do. But there it was. Canon 3. A judge should perform the duties of the office fairly, impartially, and diligently. The duties of judicial office take precedence over all other activities. The judge should perform those duties with respect for others and should not engage in behavior that is harassing, abusive. He hasn't done those two things. Prejudiced or biased. These are up for debate right now. The other thing, a judge should be faithful to and maintain professional competence in the law and should not be swayed by other interests. So do you see what I'm saying about this law code? So a lot of people came at me for my opinion, but this is what my opinion was based on. Not about, oh, well, that's only $15,000. It's not that much. It doesn't matter. This is what I was referring to when I was talking about it not being right. Number 4, a judge should accord to every person who has a legal interest in a proceeding and that person's lawyer the full right to be heard according to law. The reason I included this part is because of what I said earlier. Everyone keeps saying Blake and Justin, Blake and Justin. I feel like the decision about malice, as I already mentioned a little bit ago, because the rest of them are private citizens, don't have to meet the actual malice standard. I feel like they weren't heard. Yes, $15,000 is a lot of money. But you wouldn't believe how many people came with their laughy face emojis going, $15,000. It's not what the law says. It doesn't have a minimum requirement. Yes, Granny, Weatherwax. It doesn't matter if it was $1. But yeah, so this part, I feel like only Justin was taken into consideration in this decision. And the rest of the Wayfair parties were not fully heard according to law. They did not have to meet actual malice standard, but he held them to that. So that's how this one, I feel, was not properly handled. Now under disqualification. Now this goes back into the part that I showed before that was in the Code of Law. This is directly from that. But I want to go through it again. A judge shall disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned, if he has personal bias, if he served as a lawyer in the matter in controversy, or a lawyer with whom the judge previously practiced law served during such association. So again, I felt like that could be applied to him having worked for the companies that have Deadpool and Wolverine. I mean, if you want to watch that, where do you go? You go to Disney. The judge knows that the judge, individually or as a fiduciary, has a financial interest in the subject matter in controversy or in a party to the proceeding or in any other interests that could be affected substantially by the outcome of the proceeding. I already went through that, specifically with his Paramount investment that has that special share or that special first look contract with Ryan. If Ryan's reputation continues to tank, we've seen him lose millions of followers on Instagram. We see everything they put out gets bombarded. This could substantially affect his financial interests. Now, this one just shows what the third degree relationship is, and that does include brother. Now, this part at the very bottom is so important. As I said, people were saying, laughing about the amount of money being only $15,000 in one of them. But if you add them all together, it's hundreds of thousands. But even if it were $1, like Granny Weatherwax said, financial interest means ownership of a legal or equitable interest, however small. It doesn't have a minimum. The appearance of impropriety is the appearance of impropriety. There's no, it's just a little. All right. If a judge would be disqualified because of a financial interest in a party other than an interest that could be substantially affected by the outcome, we've already considered that could be substantially affected. Disqualification is not required if the judge divests the interest that provides the grounds for disqualification. So notice if it separates the two. If there's an interest that could not affect the outcome and they want to sell the stock, that's left okay. But even if he sold the stock, his wouldn't qualify for that because the interest could be substantially affected by the outcome. So do you see it's like two standards there? And he couldn't, even if he sold it, he still wouldn't meet that standard. Then we have Canon 4D, 1, 2, and 3. Canon 3 requires disqualification of a judge in any proceeding in which the judge has a financial interest, however small. It repeats it. Canon 4D requires a judge to refrain from engaging in business and from financial activities that might interfere with the impartial performance of the judge's judicial duties. He should have, in my opinion, disqualified himself from taking this case in the first place. And now that people are viewing it and saying this has the appearance of impropriety, he should be willing to step aside and recuse himself, in my opinion. So can we get rid of him? No, we can't. We can't get rid of him. And I didn't say this so everybody would go out and start writing things and sending things and contacting people. I don't think that's a good idea at this time. I would leave that to Justin's legal team at this time. Who knows? It might be upsetting to them that people are doing that. We don't know how they feel about that. They might be afraid that it's going to make their case worse for them. So until you see them make a move in this regard, at least myself personally, I will not. I will wait and see what Justin's legal team does, because I don't want to make a move that's going to make things worse for the Wayfarer parties. They've already been badly mistreated. So that's just I wanted to explain, because when I came on the first two times, I was really, really heated. was so angry. I felt the injustice was just overwhelming. And I don't understand a judge who wouldn't voluntarily recuse himself from this. But he stayed on, and his decisions are so unfair. A lot of them are not legally sound. I will come right out and say it this time. I have in the past continued to say, yeah, it stinks, but it's legally sound. I don't feel this time a lot of his decisions were legally sound. And I'm not the only one. And then when you couple that with all of this financial interest and the interest with his brother, it looks even worse. So yes, we can't get rid of him, but he should recuse himself, in my opinion. So thanks so much for joining tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful night. And now you can see why I said what I said. Because the first time I was just like so angry and just making, my point about something not being right. But now you can see the actual law code, what it says, why he needs to be recused, and why we can't expect him to be removed as a judge. It's just not going to happen. But have a great night, everyone.